Amelia Earhart, one of the most notable women in the 20th century, paved the way for women in aviation. However, in the biggest endeavor of her career, she disappeared. Born on July 24, 1897 in Atchison, Kansas, she fell in love with flying after attending just one air show in December of 1920. From there, she pursued her career in aviation.
But the cards were not always in her favor. Throughout her years of trying, she faced opposition. But this only encouraged her and motivated her to become the first woman to fly solo from Hawaii to California. This success put her on the map, and she became even more motivated to succeed. As time went on, her support grew. In an interview describing her transatlantic flight from Harbour Grace in Newfoundland to Ireland, she said this about what had happened after she had landed before taking off again for England.
After receiving a real Irish welcome, I took a Paramount plane to London and there received a real English welcome.
Unfortunately, her luck with flying did not last forever. Her attempt to fly around the world in 1937 proved her ambitious, but unsuccessful. She and her navigator, Fred Noonan, disappeared without any obvious trace. With the news, FDR demanded a 2-week search for the two aviators, but still, nothing was found. The president suggested that they had been lost at sea, but this conclusion has left many conspirators rather disgruntled for years.
But is that really true? Some believe it to be something completely different. There are a few theories floating around out there. 1, that they really were lost at sea. 2, they crashed on a Pacific island and lived there for a while before eventually dying. Or 3, when they crashed on said island, they were captured by the Japanese. Our theory? She was really captured by the Japanese in the belief that she was an American spy.
Throughout the flight, Amelia and Noonan were faced with many different struggles, some problems even unknown to them entirely. Unbeknownst to them, the antenna mast from the underneath of their plane snapped off during their final takeoff. With the vital communication instrument missing, they were unable to contact the outside world. In addition, they were in desperate need of fuel and were beginning to suffer from other mechanical failures. Without many options, Amelia chose to attempt a landing on one of the Micronesian islands she was hovering above. A young boy from a native tribe of the island called out to his village elders about a plane that had landed with its left wing on fire. However, the elders brushed it off as a childish nonsense.
In 2005, a dive team from the States operating under Project Blue Angel came to the area in search of the plane. They had asked for the boy who had given the report, but were saddened to learn that he had died. So, they spoke to a corrections officer who had spotted the plane while on a free dive in 1995, which verified the child's claim decades later. They could only trust what they had heard from the story that had been passed down through oral tradition and the word of the corrections officer, and they searched the coast that they had spoken of, and when they searched, they found a wreck.
They wanted to be sure of the identity of the plane before releasing it to the press, so they checked 5 distinct characteristics of the plane, which was in the model of a locked Key Electra 10E. They searched for a twin engine, a twin tail, a door on the pilot's side, a loop at the front for navigation, and a spar as the antenna.
All 5 of these characteristics matched the description given of her plane. In 2018, Project Blue Angel disclosed that the plane they had found contained characteristics of her plane. When the plane had originally crashed, it was discovered that it landed on the coast before being carried off to the sea by the tide. This would have given Amelia and Noonan enough time to exit the plane, giving them a reasonable chance of survival.
After her landing on the Marshall Islands, we believe that Earhart and Noonan were captured by the Japanese. This is fairly plausible because the Marshall Islands had been part of Japan's empire since 1914 and were relatively close to Japan's central island. At the time of the aviators' disappearance, the U.S. was quite suspicious of Japan's military facilities. The onset of World War II was just beginning, and the tensions between the two nations were steadily increasing. Because of this, the United States began to interview many of their citizens after commercial trips to the islands. 4 years later, the attack would happen on Pearl Harbor, proving that the United States' suspicion was for good reason. In 1914, at the breakout of World War I, Japan took possession over the islands to further fortify themselves. Because of Japan's influence over the Marshall Islands, it is not hard to believe that they had several military sites there. In fact, building plans from 1934 specifically proved that the mandate was for creating weapons of war. The landing of Earhart and Noonan could not easily be missed by the Japanese, as Japan greatly restricted the number of visitors that came to the islands. Any group unknown to the Japanese was thought of as a threat, and Earhart's plane could have been seen as exactly that.
In 1940, a skull was found by a group from a British expedition. When the officer of the expedition found them, he ordered a more thorough search of the island, resulting in the discovery of several more bones. At the time of the discovery, the scientists examining them determined them to be of a male native to the island. But upon further study in 1998, they determined the bones to be of a woman of European descent and to be taller than average. Amelia stood at 5'8" and had a European heritage as she was white. It is now widely accepted that the bones belong to Amelia.
A National Archives document regarding Earhart and her navigator further proves our argument. The source comes from a prisoner of the Japanese in a bottle that washed up onto the shore of the Atlantic coast. The message in the bottle says, "I have been a prisoner at Jalut in the Marshall Islands by the Japanese. In the prison there I have seen Amelia Earhart, and in another cell her mechanic, a man, as well as other European prisoners." With this somewhat unusual eyewitness report, we can verify to some degree that Earhart had been, in fact, alive on the island at some point and had likely been in the custody of the Japanese.
All of these facts and observations lead us to believe that after Earhart's imprisonment, she was killed and disposed of on a nearby island by the Japanese. How else could we explain the bones found or the letter in the bottle? Is it evident that Earhart and Noonan suffered a terrible fate in the custody of the Japanese?
The two will be remembered for years to come, but the old mystery of their disappearance may be no mystery after all.